All right, welcome back to the Bad MMA Math fight card reaction for UFC Vegas 86. This card was really bizarre. I've seen every card beginning to end for almost a decade, and this one actually put me to sleep. I had to rewatch it in the morning. Kind of wish I hadn't. So let's break down what happened in this shit show from beginning to end. Like and subscribe if you're new. We are so close to 600. All right, so the decision in the first one to have two counter-strikers fight was an interesting one. And by interesting, I mean retarded. So for the first round, you could have condensed the entire action into about a minute and a half, with the rest of it just pretty much fainting and staring. To be fair, when they did go for each other, it was exciting enough. Marcos was clapping the calf really well, and landed a really nice knee up the middle on Aori, which pretty much crushed his face. Now, in the second, they started going off a little bit more, and it was clear that Marcos was getting the upper hand. He'd won round one pretty clearly, and was very much on his way to winning the second round. Now, I sincerely hope that Aori has kids or population pudding stored in a fridge somewhere, because in like 20 seconds of action, we had 3 nut shots. We got 2 from Marcos and 1 from Aori. The weird thing about that was that both from Marcos were way worse and on the money. And it was actually Aori that copped a warning from Herzog for the one that merely grazed and arguably wasn't even a nut shot. Racism. If I'm being honest though, none of the nut shots really looked that bad. And I'd actually thought that Aori was looking for a way out. It turned out that he was rushed to hospital later in the evening to help find his missing bollock. What a sport. This one ended up being a no contest. All right, fight number 2. I got the outcome of this one wrong, but fuck me. After watching Haidar Amil go to work, I've got no regrets in not picking him. Fernie Garcia was obviously coming up from bantamweight and looked like a tiny child in there. A tiny fat child. And I felt that he would be durable enough to make it past the 2.5 mark. That was not the case. Now, to be fair, as unskilled and sloppy as this was, at least it was kind of fun to watch. They both got after it, and I kind of respect that to some extent. Both men traded hands early until Amil got caught and dropped Fernie, and you kind of felt like he was clinging on for dear life at that point. But credit to him, he managed to weather the storm a little bit, he clipped him back, and then they just got in the phone booth and started swinging like mongs. Both had their moments on top, but it was very clear as the fight went on that Amil was too strong and fresher at that weight. I do have to point out again that he is very terrible. Eventually, Fernie completely ran out of fight and gave up in the midpoint of the second round to a standing TKO. It was the correct decision. It's a 4th loss in a row for him. He was clearly very unprepared for this, and I regret nothing I said about Amil in the build-up. He was fighting a little kid, and he made this look way too difficult. He's shit, and I can see him losing his next one. Next. All right, now I don't know what Zach PAUGA did to GUSKOV, but I'm assuming it was something sinister. Now, when this one got going, I felt pretty confident in how I felt this would play out. Zach made it ugly by peppering the calf and staying at a safe distance to start the fight out. Or running like a bitch, you know, perspective is everything. Then he clinched a lot and used strikes in the position, and he used a lot of fence control, which we knew would be his tactic going into this. Now, GUSKOV isn't amazing, but has a good record of getting bums out of there early. Now, maybe GUSKOV did lull him into a little bit of false sense security here. PAUGA had taken a few shots and clearly wasn't overly concerned. Yeah, he probably should have been a bit more respectful. With about a minute and a half left of the round, GUSKOV landed a combo which crumbled PAUGA, and then stood over him shouting, "Fuck Moana, I hated that movie," which I thought was a little bit unnecessary. I wouldn't call the finish devastating, but a good combination of accurate right and lefts in succession that got it done. It was a decent win for the Russian. He seemed pretty chuffed with his work. All right, fight number 4. This was a decent scrap, but pretty much a waste of everyone's time. I managed to double up by saying this would go the distance, and what's his face? GRIFFIN would edge it. And yeah, that's pretty much how this went down. I'm not going to break this down step by step because I can't really be asked. And there were barely any moments of real note. Like, nobody got badly hurt. I just thought GRIFFIN was cleaner and more active and technical. And Wells was pretty much constantly trying to load up and catch GRIFFIN with something massive, which he didn't manage to. Both are pretty much welterweight litmus tests at this point. They're both too old to make a push, but they're both kind of tough enough to be a roadblock for contenders that are coming up behind them. GRIFFIN's been around for a while now, so he's probably on a decently paid contract. As I said, this wasn't overly exciting. I was hoping for a little bit more, and what was ultimately the point, really. GRIFFIN won. Good for him. Takedown defense was good in this one. He was far busier. He out-experienced Wells, who is just sloppy and a little bit too wild. All right, next one up. I picked Devin Clark, who I know is shit, so all I can really say is sorry. This was another low IQ display from a complete retard. Now, Devin tricked me in the build-up by saying that he recognized that he was falling in love with his hands too much and that he needed to go back to what made him successful, push his wrestling base and control on the ground. You charmed me, you slippery little bastard. So yeah, obviously he decided to play in kickboxing range with a credentialed kickboxer when you're a wrestler. And this is exactly what I mean. Retardation is such a hard thing to preempt when you're trying to pick fight winners. Now, PRACHNIO ended up outlanding him 3-1 overall in the fight. He stayed comfortably at range and varied strikes to the leg, to the body, to the head. Clark, oh, I'm a boxer now, tried to throw strikes out of range, purely to the head. He did throw 1 or 2 head kicks, so, you know, well done for that. Stupid, nonsensical performance. Clear shutout. UD for Marcin, and it was rightly called that way. I didn't bet on Clark, but I did pick him. Do something else, though, Devin. This game just ain't for you. Marcin, good job. Sorry for the disrespect. Until the next time, anyway. Alright, it was during this fight that I realized that I was unlikely to make it to the end of this event. This matchup kind of baffled me to begin with. I didn't really like the fact that it was taking place at all. Brazil basically felt like a step down for Loma, who's already fought and beaten better girls than her. This one basically felt like a sparring session. Brazil has all the physical advantages in there. She's taller, she's got a much longer reach, but none of the skill advantages. She did snap at Loma's leg a little to start out, and I thought, oh good, and I was like struggling to keep my eyelids open. They were getting pretty heavy at this point. But yeah, to summarize, Loma was more active, she landed takedowns when she needed to, and just generally had more variety. Brazil was way more reactive, and just refused to step forward and show any aggression or initiative. I don't know why this fight was made, or what was achieved here. Loma is decent enough, I guess, so it's just a way of building her record a little bit more. Let's just delete this one from our collective memories and move on. Loma won the fight, it was pretty clear. Alright, this fight was not bad, although I must admit that I might have overhyped Oki just a little bit. CUAMBA took this on short notice and did okay in there. You know, he's 25 years old, 8-2 records. He did manage to take Oki down at one point, but didn't really look too threatening in there. There wasn't much damage done. Oki really did impress me though with his head movement. He was pretty defensively responsible, and he's got a really nice popping jab that was landing for pretty much the entire evening. As the fight progressed, he got more comfortable. He showed he could stay locked in and stick to a game plan. He didn't panic when he got taken down. Pre-UFC, he's shown some really great KO power, and whilst that wasn't on display here, against a short notice opponent who is actually quite a skilled wrestler, or so I've heard, I understood the need to stay safe here. He never really got out of second gear and didn't really need to. I really like his composure. CUAMBA did look pretty mid, but I would like to see him get another chance in a full camp. This fight was really easy to score in my mind. I thought 2-1 was pretty fair, but one judge gave it to CUAMBA. I'd love to see the explanation for that one. Don't see how he won 2 rounds, but whatever. This one lacked a lot of intensity and kind of represented what the card had been like up to this point. Very pedestrian. A win for Oki is good. I expect now that he's settled and had his debut, we'll see more from him in his next one. Alright, so this was the main event of the prelims. You know what? I was actually quite impressed with Giles for the majority of this contest. He looked huge at welterweight, and frankly, I thought that Antoine had bagged another sneaky and very well thought out win here. Giles was controlling this entire contest until he suddenly wasn't. Prates focused on stabbing away at the lead leg of Giles, while stabbing to the body at times, and he kept distance for the early part of the fight, which I felt like he was winning. Some of the kicks landed to the stomach with quite a little bit of FUD, and I think that scored quite well. Now, credit to Giles, he realized very quickly what Prates was doing in terms of using the distance and trying to point fight, and he started to step in more and just started throwing hands. And while he didn't really hurt Prates much, he clearly started to unsettle him, and then he started teeping him back to keep him guessing. He snuck the round for me by being a bit more impactful. Now, the second round, Giles came out really aggressively and looked great doing it. He went back to working the teeps, stepped in more, started throwing the hands with a bit more freedom. At this point, I was thinking Giles is eventually going to catch him or just shut him out for a decision win. But then the end came like quite suddenly. Giles basically switched off for a moment, and then as Prates landed a knee, and then rather than reset as he was doing for most of the fight, you know, he'd land a knee and then step back, he landed the knee and then followed up with a left flush right over the top that flatlined Giles out cold. Now, as bad as this was for Giles, he did look pretty good at welterweight, but maybe the draining maybe caught up to him, and that's why he was able to get knocked out so easily. Prates looked pretty poor up until the KO. He was losing this fight. Alright, so here is an overview of how the prelims went. Two very poor prelims in a row for me, to be honest. I probably should have been 5-3, but the nut shot in the first contest completely ruined that. So 4-3 ended up being more than I could have hoped for, given that I started, I think I started 0-3 to get going, so it wasn't looking too good. Alright, now onto the main card, and this was probably the most disappointing one of the night for me. I called this one of my locks, and I'm embarrassed for that. Rodolfo Vieira does deserve some credit for this one, but he's just not a good MMA fighter, and I stand by that. Petrosyan was applying pressure quite early, forcing Vieira backwards, which was the right move, I thought. I know he was mixing up his strikes well, but then he got way too comfortable getting too close and got caught in a double leg and taken down pretty early and pretty easily, which was very careless considering that's pretty much Vieira's main threat. I'd argue it's his only threat. Once Vieira has you in that position on the ground, it's when he does his best work. You know, he's a strong guy, he's quite heavy. And once he had him there, it was curtains. Now, the most disappointing aspect for me was that I kind of expected this to happen in the first round, but I expected Petrosyan to get out of it. But he ended up tapping with like a few seconds left in the rounds, and then had the utter cheek to get up and act like it was an incorrect stoppage. Like, you tapped 5 times, you prick. Are you aware that there are cameras in the arena and that there's millions of people watching? This was a good win for Rodolfo to get on his records, but this was a really pathetic performance from Armin, and it really lowered his stock significantly in my book. This was the point where I fell asleep watching it live, by the way. All right, the second fight on the main card. This was a really good performance from Michael Johnson, who has always been better than his record suggests. He's fought pretty much everyone at featherweight, and he always makes it close. I'm curious to kind of know what contract this man is on. Let me have a check real quick. Wow, he's on 240,000 a fight. That's nice. You know, for how badly the UFC pay, the further you get into your contract is when you see the real bucks. Guru's really wrong about this issue, but I'll get into that another time. Flowers only made 16 grand. Ouch. Anyway, Johnson was way more quick and active and was really smart in the way that he targeted shots to the chest and stomach in particular. And Flowers seemed really, really confused by this approach. Johnson did not let off on the pace, and Flowers had no chance to settle whatsoever. Couldn't work him out. I was expecting Flowers to look a little bit bigger than Johnson. He didn't. What this man was doing fighting at fucking welterweight is beyond me. By the third, Johnson was clearly ahead and found a nice takedown in maybe the first minute of the round, if I'm remembering correctly. Found Mount pretty easily. Flowers had absolutely nothing off his back whatsoever, and Johnson was transitioning really nicely. Flowers did manage to rally a little bit late, but it was way too late to make any kind of comeback. Flowers might have got a few fights on his contract, but we're not going to be seeing this bum again. Nice win for Johnson, and very nice check. All right, so I have some thoughts about this one. Rodriguez has clearly improved from fight to fight and carries a massive threat when striking. Like, he hits with ferocity and mixes up strikes to different areas well, which I really like. I've always liked that about his game. What I really like now, though, is that he's learning to be a lot more diverse. I also appreciate the fact that he's willing to clinch a lot more and go for takedowns, as it gives his opponents more to think about and allows him to set up what he's doing. The biggest issue for me, though, is that sometimes his entries can be a little bit sloppy. Like, his BJJ is really good, but his entries are sometimes very ill-timed and not very explosive. And then when he gets back to swinging, he sometimes leaves his chin like way out in the open and completely forgets to defend responsibly. If Tavares had more power, he could have chinned Rodriguez out badly in the first. Like, he caught Rodriguez when he was coming in. And yeah, if he'd had more power, he could have absolutely flatlined him. Anyway, the second was when Rodriguez really started to take over. He was throwing hands, set up a clinch right into it. And he does some real damage when he's in close and throwing knees, which is such an underrated form of attack. Like, when you're watching it on television sometimes, it looks like they're quite soft and they're not doing anything, but they're really good at draining someone's tank. Another thing I really liked about Rodriguez in this one is he was a lot more patient, certainly from the second round onwards, and that's the biggest difference that we're seeing from him. Now, the end came early in the third, and the finishing sequence from Rodriguez was excellent. He landed a really flush knee up the middle, which was the beginning of the end, and then the follow-up thudding shots were just brutal. It ended up being a standing TKO, but it was rightly stopped. Tavares was absolutely fucked. This for me was Rodriguez's best performance. I know he's KO'd guys in the first round, but everything that led to this, the patience, the variety. So if he's able to do this more often, and retain that power until the 3rd round, this man's going to cause some problems in this division. Alright, now fight number 4. This wasn't the greatest fight, but POTERIA showed me a lot here, and I think he should actually make the move to middleweight permanently. He looked absolutely massive in there, and he still looks like he has some body fat that he can still shed. Now, BRYCZEK did land a little in the first early on, but in true like tin can crusher fashion, he looked quite shocked when POTERIA just kept eating them and coming back. There was danger that this could have ended in the 1st round with an eye poke, which was landed by the pole. And I just love when refs advise fighters to keep their fists closed. Shut up and stop giving advice. This is not a boxing fight. You need your hands open sometimes in order to grab and to do that kind of thing with your game. So I don't know why refs keep saying this. Now, the first was pretty much a wash when BRYCZEK landed an accidental punch to the balls. It's not something we see too often, and that just reset things again. POTERIA, though, you could see was finding his rhythm and was starting to avoid what's coming back. I really like the guy's head movement at times. Now, in the second, POTERIA was clearly unimpressed with what was coming back and started dropping his hands more and was then popping out the jab, which was proving really effective. POTERIA was way more diverse in this fight, and it became very clear at the midpoint that BRYCZEK only had one method of attack, and that was to box. Whereas POTERIA was throwing kicks, he was landing jabs, he was threatening takedowns, and he was kind of disguising the takedowns a lot as well. Like he'd go for a takedown and then immediately release it and then throw an uppercut in there, which I thought was really, really nice. When you only throw hands, your opponent at this level will read everything. Now in the 3rd round, POTERIA stepped it up, started stepping in, caught him nicely with a quick right and then a left, and then just started swarming his ass. It was pretty obvious at that point that BRYCZEK was gassed and didn't have much left. This was easily the most fun round of the fight, and POTERIA pretty much punctuated it by putting his foot on the gas and seeing out a comfortable win. I was very impressed with him in this one. He's actually pretty good. BRYCZEK needs to learn to be more diverse, or he's going to get eaten alive at this level. His game is fucking obvious. Alright, now on to the co-main. What can I say? FILI made an enormous mistake taking this fight at short notice. They'd obviously trained together in the past, and FILI obviously, you know, got a little bit too confident off that, we'll just say. Ige's defense in this one was so exemplary. Like, he uses that high guard quite well, which is why he never gets flatlined. And he's such a small featherweight that when he bursts out with real speed and power, he's so devastating. When the chinning came, it was brutal. FILI basically tried to pop out a really lazy jab, and just as he lowered his hand to reset, Ige came right over the top and cracked him with an absolute beauty. The smack on the ground was not really necessary. He was pretty much out at that point, but them's are the rules. A bad fight to take on short notice, as I said, and absolutely brutal. FILI was looking up seconds later and was asking what happened, which pretty much summed this one up to a T. Man, if he treats his friends like this, how does he treat people that he doesn't like? All right, on to the main event. And this one was a shocker to me. I mean, we saw what we both said in the build-up to this. I thought this was going to be a brutal battering in the first round. Instead, it was a fraud check, and I couldn't be happier to see it. Now, I asked the question, was this too early for Joe PYFER in the build-up? And it was a little bit tongue-in-cheek, because as I said, I did think that PYFER was going to flatline him. Maybe, and more importantly, what we have to ask now, is PYFER just not that good? Now, in the first 2 rounds, PYFER looked in decent control. He was landing harder and appeared to be quite patient in there. but Jack did a really good job of not overcommitting and panicking in the situation. Shouting a good round Jack at the end of the first round just made me want to see PYFER get fucking chindo. I just find this dude insufferable. I think he's such a wet wipe. Now, PYFER did edge the second for me, but Jack was starting to apply more pressure, and it was clear that old Joey had less FUD in his shots. Now, the worrying thing about this was it's not like PYFER was throwing a lot of volume to get gassed out at this point. There was a funny moment in the second round, actually, which I'm just remembering, when Jack landed to the chin, and then PYFER went, oh, like, nice shot, bro. And then Jack just, like, blasted him in the leg and said, oh, yeah, do you like that one? And PYFER went, hey, yeah, nice too. And then Jack was like, thanks, bro. I thought they were going to start making out at that point. It was all a little bit silly. PYFER, as I said, edged that round, but he looked a little bit concerned when he hit the stool. And while Jack is not a well beater, you cannot let him settle into a fight. From then on, it was pretty much all Hermansson. He rushed out in the third, applied pressure immediately. Hermansson was, again, applying that high guard often, and PYFER was way too dumb to work the body. Now, in the post-fight, he did say that the calf kicks were causing him problems and it was making him reluctant to hit to the body. I'm not a fighter, I don't really get how he worked that one out. But anyway, the more that it went on, the more that PYFER wilted, and you could see that Hermansson was just growing and growing. The jab was really effective for Hermansson. You know, I don't really rate his boxing that highly, but the jab was really good tonight. So the final 3 rounds, Hermansson pretty much dominated it with that jab and forward pressure, and I did not see that coming. Again, what worries me if I'm a PYFER fan, which as you know I'm not, when he gets tired, he gets very one-dimensional. Like, he stopped throwing anything to the body, stopped throwing leg kicks, and he was just throwing hands and looking for that Hail Mary strike to get the guy out of there. And this allowed Jack to see everything that was coming, and he just dominated it out until the final bell. Really good performance from Hermansson. I didn't think he was going to get it done. I think he proved everyone wrong. I don't know anyone that was picking Hermansson in this. Alright, so here's an overview of the final selections. Another winning card, just about. And just like last week, Antoine and I both ended with exactly the same records. Now, next week is the big one. And again, a double breakdown is incoming. It's a massive card. We'll probably get that one out tomorrow night or maybe Tuesday at the latest. Have a great one. Oh, also check out the last video I did on the top 10 most overrated fighters in the current rankings. And I've also got a pod coming out. I think I'm going to drop it on Thursday. This was a crappy card overall. By the way, I'm pretty much fuming. I had to watch it twice. Have a great week and see you in a bit.